No.
All right, guys, welcome to, Coach Aaron is wrangling up two children right now. Welcome to our first monthly support call. Just a reminder, we're doing one of these a month. Really cool idea that we stole from Leah and her crew at BirthFit. They do a monthly support call. We loved the question and answer that we were doing during the Win the Year challenge, and we figured, hey, how can we make this a thing going forward? And we thought of this idea. So this is our opportunity to talk about some things that have come up amongst our coaches and community over the past handful of weeks. But it's really an awesome time for us to chat through some questions that maybe we funnel through our newsletter or our Facebook group, or maybe just in conversation with some of our members. But also, if anybody jumps on here live as well, we can also answer some live questions. And then this might actually just turn into, because I kind of like where we're at today, we've got a few topics of discussion, but I kind of like almost giving a topic or knowing a topic and saying, hey, this is a topic that we're going to talk through. We do have Mr. TJ live. I love it. But having a topic of discussion. So today, if we don't have any questions from our live studio audience, I think we'll just jump into a few topics that we have to cover and just spitball back and forth with Coach Arian and Coach Asia.
I do have a question, but we can get to it whenever you guys want.
TJ, let's start with it, man. Go ahead, hit us.
Yeah, so I don't know if I've actually shared it with you, but I've been having some issues returning to my shoulder related to rotary cuff injuries. And my question is, what exercises should I really be avoiding with rotary cuff issues? And then what kind of exercises should I try to do more of, maybe at a lighter weight, to help recover it?
Okay, great question. Just so that I'm clear, I believe the question was, you're having some issues with your rotator cuff, and you're interested in what movements you should be doing to strengthen or benefit or improve your current condition, and what movements you should probably stay away from. Am I correct when I say that?
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so just an overview, the rotator cuffs, we've got three rotator cuffs. We've got the infraspinatus, we have the supraspinatus, and then we have the teres minor. And these are all very small ligaments that actually hold the shoulder joint in place. And they're main proponents in like rotating the shoulder, externally and internally rotating the shoulder, but then they have a big part in obviously flexion, extension, stuff like that. Now, if there is, the first thing that I would usually ask the individual like yourself is, first thing that we have to understand is like, injury doesn't equal pain, pain doesn't equal injury. Usually if we have something that's going on with our shoulder, there's some sort of pain response from the body that's signaling to the brain like, ow, this hurts, whether it's pressing overhead, whether it's rotating my shoulder, sometimes just reaching for a glass in the cupboard. So there is some pain there. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is an injury there, right? There could be a whole host of different things that are going on. And this is a pretty loaded question too, because I think the best answer might be, it really depends on what is actually going on specifically. For instance, if there is a massive tear in the rotator cuff, I don't necessarily know if there's any beneficial exercises that are going to benefit or reduce the amount of pain that you're experiencing outside of, a surgical repair or a cortisone shot. We've seen a whole host of different examples of people that have torn their rotator cuffs and have had an extreme amount of pain, but we've also had people that have been able to deal with the pain. They've just been really limited in what they're able to do. And so it really depends on what's going on in the shoulder specifically, if it is the rotator cuffs or if it isn't. But if I was going to give kind of like a blanket approach on things that would be beneficial for strengthening the rotator cuffs, is any sort of like banded external rotations or internal rotations. Anytime that we're working on like externally rotating the glenohumeral socket or the shoulder, or internally rotating, we are really honing in on the rotator cuffs specifically. When we are doing scapular work, like the scaps, these big bones that we have on the backs of our shoulders that aid in moving the shoulder in all different ranges of motion, strengthening those. Obviously, strengthening the surrounding musculature of the shoulder girdle can help as well. A lot of stability exercises too. So when you think about the rotator cuffs, they're a big stabilizer I don't want to call them muscles, but stabilizer tendons and ligaments. So like isometric holds, shoulder taps. We do a lot of those in the warm up, sometimes in the workouts. Overhead holds are great ways to stabilize the shoulder girdle. And then obviously things that like you should probably avoid are things that create pain. It's not to say that if you do have some issues going on with your rotator cuffs that you are going to be unable to press, whether it's horizontally or vertically overhead. We do a lot of both in our GPP program. It's just going to be dependent on, where there is pain and where there is tolerable pain. If there is like a consistent level of pain that is above like a 5 out of a 10, and it's just continuing like week after week after week after week, I would start to begin to look at maybe some higher level knowledge of folks that could probably take a look at your shoulder. We've got, Coach Evan, Coach Jonathan are kind of our pain management, pain assessment experts, but also sometimes seeing like a muscle worker, or sometimes if it gets to the point where the pain level is intolerable and it is almost to the point where it's affecting your quality of life, sometimes going to a orthopedic surgeon or a doctor and taking some imaging can be helpful and beneficial if that is the direction that you choose to go. But from a 1,000-foot perspective, a kind of blanket approach, that's what I would suggest and recommend. Aaron could probably talk a little bit more too, since his wife has dealt with some shoulder issues in the past as well. So I'll kind of hand it off to him.
Yeah, Asia, you had some really good points. TJ, he's right. There's so many variables that go into shoulder pain and specific kind of shoulder dysfunction. So it kind of has a few questions that you have to think about. One, is this something that you developed over time, or is this something that happened after one session and you noticed it? If it's something that developed over time, most likely there is potentially an imbalance. There is a movement fault, whether you're moving through a range of motion that doesn't necessarily track well. So think about this in terms of like people who don't have great overhead range of motion, like say with a barbell, but they force their way into it anyways. They're kind of, gritting through some of the work, just knowing that that might not be the best option for them. Sometimes can create it. The other thing you have to think about, if this is something that bothers you all of the time or just in the gym, because I know a lot of times people, especially those who come early in the morning, if you're a shoulder sleeper, I'm not sure if you could see me right now, but if I'm sleeping, like, if I'm horizontal and I'm sleeping on my shoulder, and my shoulder's in this really weird position kind of all night, I'm sleeping on it, and then I come to the gym and I'm trying to do something in these positions, a lot of times that could be the issue. So it could be the fact that, like Asia was saying, there could be some dysfunction in there. There could be some specific things going on. It could be just an imbalance that, might be due to the fact that you're coming in straight fresh from the morning. Those external rotation pieces that he was saying, just kind of warming it up. We do a lot of, I know the classes that I've led, we have a lot of overhead pieces. I do a lot of specific banded, like external, internal rotations to kind of warm those up. And those all can be really good. But like you said, kind of avoiding things that are extremely painful is always going to be probably your best bet, but it also doesn't necessarily solve the problem. So if this is something that you've been dealing with for like a week, that's different than if this is something that's been going on for like 6 months. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the sleeping portion and the working out in the morning is actually what happened in this situation. As I mentioned, these are issues I've experienced multiple times in the past, from playing football to being lazy and then trying to do something heavy. And then this last occurrence was during the retest at the end of January, doing it in the morning. And so that what you described is likely the cause of what happened here. Now I'm just looking to recover, and I borrowed a band, so I've been doing exercises. But what I've noticed, the pain or where it is when I try to extend my arm out to the side and raise over or above where parallel would be with the ground. Anything above that is pretty painful. But it's gotten better. Like I can do things around the house and then not hurt, like open a cabinet and get a plate out. That was actually pretty painful the first week. But we're a couple weeks past that now, so it's still lingering, but I think it is getting better. Does icing or would icing help?
Great question. So icing, there's kind of some mixed takes on icing. So icing, if you think about the main focus of it, it numbs, it cools, it slows blood flow down. When you're dealing with like inflammation and healing, a lot of times that's not necessarily the best option for it. It does have some numbing. So when there is discomfort and things like that, I've seen a lot of good stuff, and either both personally and from just anecdotally from some of the people that we've worked with, of doing contrast, where it's a combination of heat for about 5 to 10 minutes and then directly ice. So you're speeding up kind of localized heat inflammation in that area to speed up blood flow, and then immediately going to ice after that to slow it down, and going kind of alternating between the two, for a few times. So if you're sitting and watching, an hour of TV, or if you're at work and you have the ability to throw a heating pad on it and then put ice on it, that could actually really help. It helped wonders with my wife's ankle. We've done it a bunch for, again, certain body parts are easier to do than others, but when you're able to do it, we've seen a lot more kind of recovery from that standpoint.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, those are great points, Aaron. I actually think the guy that invented the acronym and method of RICE actually came back and was like, yeah, ice is not the best thing to do here, but compressive and heat forces. Ice is really great for pain management. If pain levels are pretty exceeding and pretty high, that can help kind of numb the area and take the pain away. But what we know about the inflammatory process of the body, like that localized inflammation process, that's essentially like our body trying to heal the area. So definitely want to be respectful of that, not necessarily ice if we don't have to.
Something else,
that's
TJ.
definitely the opposite of what we've been told in the past. So good point.
Yeah, it's funny. Information changes rapidly, but sometimes rhetoric doesn't. So yeah, we try to stay on top of that as best we can. But again, big piece of why we're pushing this. So the last thing I would say too is something to be mindful of. Those little positional muscles, those stabilizer muscles, a lot of time they don't necessarily have a ton of endurance or strength. And so what you typically see if you're doing a pull-up or a max effort press or something that's extremely fatiguing on the big muscles, and they wear out, and then you're relying on the little muscles to do more stability, that's where I think you can see more problematic injury, especially if you're in like compromising positions where your shoulder is, out of place. That would be, kipping style movements, things that we don't typically practice in high volume anyway. So you shouldn't theoretically be at risk, but like snatches, something where you require stability and strength and range of motion. So if it is something that's problematic, I would definitely be mindful of like higher volume workouts that require a lot of overhead stability. So like that would be like a high volume snatch, high volume push-ups, pull-ups, things like that, where you are going to fatigue out your big muscles and rely on those stabilizers to hold you in place.
Yeah, really good points. Just to touch additionally on that is when we think about like our body's capacity to exhibit, quality movement mechanics, whether we think about intensity and volume, and Arian hit on a really good point, is like if your body's already suppressed in a localized area, whether it's like an injury in the shoulder, the knee, or the hip, the quickest thing that's going to tap into those pain receptors or those issues is going past our earned capacities. And we talk a lot about that, and that might be ripping out a set of 50 might tap into those unearned capacities versus bringing it up into like 10 sets of 5. But yeah, as you start to fatigue the localized area and the muscle groups, and you're going to have to tap into, you're going to fatigue the nervous system, and that brain body connection is no longer going to have that ability to really focus on the things that you're trying to focus on. And everybody has felt it, right? You come in off of on round 3 of 5 rounds of Nancy-ish. You go to pick up the barbell, you're fatigued, you're out of breath, you're tired, your legs are heavy. Like, we're less likely to really hone in and focus on those tiny little things that we need to be doing, much less if we have like a hip or a knee or a shoulder injury. That's where things could really get pretty nasty and pretty sticky. So reducing the intensity, reducing the volume, and then just tapping into your intuitive system and like going off of like, how do things feel? Are they painful? Are they uncomfortable? And not allowing kind of the ego to take over. Really good question though. Killer Cam has joined us. We can open up for any other questions. It was a great question there though, TJ. TJ, if I had to give you any last recommendation, if it is improving, like clearly what you're doing is helping, we can always continue the conversation in person. But yeah, another good person to reach out to is Coach Evan, who's kind of our pain management specialist. And if it's something that doesn't improve, or it's just continuing to nag you, right, it might be helpful to kind of get in and take a look at some mobility and stability, our joint by joint assessment that we usually take our folks through.
Yeah, thanks for that. I've been a little bit strategic on the classes I go to, and I've been limiting it to 3 a week and not trying to overdo it. So I may give that another week, see how it does, see if it recovers more, and we'll go from there.
Cool. Yeah, and the last thing that I'll say on that too is like we never want injuries like this to have to push us into areas that aren't desirable for us, right? Additional rest, not being able to come to the gym and train the things that we want to train. And so oftentimes what we're able to do on the side basis is kind of create a program that keeps you inside the gym space without having you to miss time inside of the gym, but maybe localize the focus in some additional programming to that area to help speed things on up. Because oftentimes rest isn't necessarily like the best or even a good solution. Sometimes, depending on what's going on, rest can be a great solution, but oftentimes we think that it's kind of like an ultimate band-aid. But sometimes, you know, we need to train the area, or we need to really hone in on what's going on to fix what's going on.
Can I just come on and say big applaud for Coach Asia for naming all of the muscles of the rotator cuff and the anatomical correct name of the shoulder joint.
Well, it's impressive, yeah.
Thank you, guys.
I will say, I think you missed. I think there's the subscapularis too. So I think the subscap is the final muscle of the rotator cuff. But
I might have
still very, very.
I might be subscap or teres minor. I'm pretty sure it was teres minor, and I'm pretty sure there's only 3. I don't know if there is 4, but I could be wrong on that. I'll take 2 out of 3.
Yeah, I think you hit the other 3. Yeah, it's definitely teres, infraspinatus, supraspinatus. I think it's subscap as well. But you're right. You're right too.
One other thing that you might want to look into, TJ, not to beat a horse to death, but there's a program out there that we got into early on. I really like their protocol. I think they're still doing some stuff, but it's called what was it called? Was it called crossover symmetry? We still have some of their bands in the back, and they had a really cool protocol that pretty much just honed in on the stabilizer muscles, the subscap, the scap area, and it was like a very simple 7-minute protocol that you would do like pre-training. And that's something that I think we still have some of those in the back that I could definitely walk you through next time at the gym. But it's more of a like localized training for exactly the question that you brought up for those specific areas.
All right, cool.
All right. Any other questions? That was a great question. Otherwise, we probably have time to talk about one of our topics. Arian?
I have one. Have y'all seen 22.1 yet?
No, I haven't. Cam, will you want to share it for us?
Sure. It is 3 wall walks, 12 single arm dumbbell snatches, and 15 box overs. As many rounds and reps as possible for 15 minutes.
Like it. I was actually talking to Leah today, and I was like, man, it's gonna be weird that like Castro's not out there announcing the workout. How did that go?
It went fine. There was a really long delay with Tia, who was announcing it. So it was like they would talk to her, and then there was like this probably 12 second delay, which on a live feed is an eternity before she had to read it. But it worked out okay in the end.
That's great. I mean, if you're gonna let anybody step into the role of Dave Castro, you better let it be the fittest woman on earth.
Right. Unrelated to that though, just trying to gauge some interest, and TJ, I kind of like your input too. Would there any opportunity in the near future be for a 6 a.m. class to happen on maybe Tuesday or Thursday? I know some of us AMers would like to get maybe one more workout in during the week. Is that a possibility to put on the future? Maybe.
I love this question.
Yes,
that's
TJ,
my support.
thank you. Yeah. I've already got at least 4 that are also interested in possibly doing this as well.
Yeah, you know, this is something that we have gotten from here and there members too. But like the next schedule progression would be probably like a Tuesday morning block, whether it's like I mean, it likely is going to be a 5 and a 6 a.m. Like if we look back before COVID, we pretty much had our schedule was a little bit bigger than it was now, but we did have that 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. block on Tuesday. And we had a little bit bigger block on some of the afternoons on some of the days, but it's going to just come with like demand. So for instance, like if you see the Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes, like what we're looking at, are these classes filling on up? And do we need to create more space for spillover? And like, as we see these classes grow and fill on up, then we see the opportunity to start adding some additional classes too. But we're also in the process of developing a few coaches too, that we hopefully can, be able to kind of get the ball rolling on to start stepping into some of those additional roles you guys are looking for. So I would say that it is adding an AM block on Tuesday is definitely in the future. I just don't know how near future versus far future.
Okay, that's fair. All right, I'm good.
All right, Aaron, I think we got time to briefly chat about one of the topics. Actually, let's just stick with nutritional labels versus ingredient lists. If and when you're buying packaged foods, I mean, we all buy packaged foods. Like, it's literally at arm's reach anywhere we look. Like, what's more imperative to you? And let's talk kind of briefly on the pros and cons versus one versus the other.
Yeah, it's I really feel like the overarching point always stems back to your goals. So I'm a big believer that, like, based off of what your specific desires are, like, it's going to dictate like what your budget and kind of tolerances allow. And so for somebody who has, I would say, like a weight loss or weight gain journey, I would say that the ingredient list probably wouldn't be as important as the nutritional label. So looking at calories more specifically there. When you start paying attention to longevity, for somebody who's willing and bought in to do both, I think you can do both for sure. But when I have to, if you put me, kind of gun to my head about that circumstance, if I'm looking at it with somebody who has, is just starting this process and is going through, this lifestyle piece change, I would say that the biggest driving factor for them would be the nutritional label. Secondarily, and again, I think this probably ebbs more into kind of somebody who has a more maintenance style goal, or they've already accomplished their goal and they're shifting their gears, they're looking for a more longevity piece, that I absolutely agree with you that the ingredient list becomes hands down the most important piece. And the great part about it is you probably don't ever have to even look at the nutritional label at that point, because ideally you're buying foods that don't have the nutritional label, right? You're buying produce, you're getting local, grass-fed beef, or things along those lines, where you're no longer even in the real consideration of calories in versus calories out. It all comes back down, like you said, micronutrients and just filling up the variety of kind of what you're looking for out of a daily take.
Yeah, those are all good points. I think there's pros and cons to both, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that nutritional labels are imperative to look at when we are, when we're goal centric specifically. And what we mean by that is, like, if we have a body composition change, or whether it's up or down, we have to take into account calorie balance, calories in versus calories out. How many am I consuming versus how much am I expending? That's when nutritional labels are very beneficial. And when I say nutritional labels, sometimes I think it's not very clear on what the difference is. So I'm going to pull up nutritional label on Google real quick. And so when we look at the back of a product, okay, the nutrition facts on there, it's pretty much going to show us servings per container, per package, or whatever, serving size, calories. And a lot of times people don't really know how to read nutritional labels, right? This isn't necessarily saying there's 100 calories in this product, but there's 100 calories per serving. So if you look at the total servings in this product, there's 16. So if we consume this whole package, that is 1,600 calories. And I think that's often overlooked. It's something that seems commonsensical, but oftentimes it's overlooked. And then you're looking at, total fat, saturated fat, sodium, potassium, all these different things. And in my personal opinion, and Aaron and I are at points where it's like we are at a cruise control point of our lives, where we're more focused on ingredient lists than we are nutrition facts. But nutrition facts definitely have their role, and a lot of this is based off of like your standard recommendation, right? Your daily value recommendation, which some can argue has value and some cannot. But the big thing that we look at here when it comes to packages within the nutritional label is like how many calories are in this actual product that I'm consuming, because that's going to be very, very important when it comes down to your specific body composition goal, whether it's gain or lose. We want to know how many calories we're taking in, and usually there's going to be some sort of nutritional label on every sort of food that we purchase. Now, so pros of nutritional labels are seeing, in my personal opinion, like you're looking at the total calorie load of that certain food. If we go back to a nutritional label and nutritional fact, other than the actual calories inside the food, like I'm not really concerned with anything else specifically. Like you're going to see some macronutrients, fat will pop off the page, protein, carbs will pop off the page. I think that's important too, because when people are following more of like a macronutrient approach, right, there's certain levels or baselines that we need to hit per the day, per the meal. So it's important to know those numbers. But then when it comes down to like the sodiums, the potassiums, the trans fats, a lot of these things are kind of irrelevant numbers in my opinion, and to me as well. But I think pros for nutritional facts are looking at those main macronutrients, looking at total calorie load, and then being able to calculate total calorie load in the actual product. So remember, this 100 calories isn't what is in this product. It is 100 calories per serving times however many servings are in the actual nutritional facts. Now, if we look at something like an ingredient list, this, in my personal opinion, in my everyday life, is something that is a lot more important to me. And what I mean by that is this is going to actually show me right here what is actually in this product. What is this product made up of? And I think there's a lot of times when we're in the grocery stores or wherever we are and we're buying products, I think we go to the nutrition facts over the ingredient list. And I think it's imperative to really look at both. And in my personal opinion, ingredient list first, because there's often products that are going to claim certain things on the label that are going to get you to buy it, when in turn, what they're claiming on the actual front portion, the advertisement portion of the product, is not actually what the product is made up of, or not completely what it's made up of. I was in Kroger today, and I'll use an example of, I saw a frozen cauliflower pizza, right? Cauliflower crust pizza, right? You're like, oh, that's healthy, right? Or it's healthier per se than just a regular pizza because it's made of cauliflower crust. But you turn it on around, and it's like, cauliflower dried powdered, cauliflower powder is like the 4th or 5th ingredient on the list, and you notice that the base of the pizza or the base of the crust is more, wheat flour, whatever it is. So what they're advertising on the product isn't always what they're saying is actually in the product, and that's why I think the ingredient list is imperative to observe, because we want to make sure that the product that we're buying has minimal ingredients and is actually what the product is made up of. And so the last thing I want to finish with, as far as like ingredient list versus nutrition facts, is there's a couple of rules of thumb that I like to follow and I encourage our members to follow when it comes to buying packaged foods. Is number one, you want to look for an ingredient list that has pronounceable ingredients, right? And so if I looked at this ingredient list, gluten-free flour, I obviously know what that is. But then I might get into things, that has like certain ingredients, whether they're emulsifiers or preservatives. I mean, we've all seen them where it's like, I don't even really know what that is. I don't even really know how to pronounce it. That's like kind of number one thing, is like, are we buying products that have ingredient lists that have pronounceable, recognizable ingredients? The second thing that we look for is, do these ingredients fit our nutritional standards? So for instance, and I'll use this ingredient list as an example, is if I'm gluten-free and I don't want to have gluten in any foods that I'm buying, and I want to be certain that if I go and buy this product, that it's like respectful of those nutritional standards. There's no oat flour, wheat flour, stuff like that. It's a gluten-free flour. I know that is more fitting for my nutritional standards. And then lastly is we want as minimal ingredients as possible. And so I'll show you an example that I always like to use here of an ingredient list for, let's say, protein bar ingredient list. Okay, we'll look at something like this. Okay, this is a pro bar. I don't know what it is, but you guys could probably not see this, but this is like a protein bar per se. And if you notice, look how big the ingredient list is. It starts with organic brown rice syrup. If you guys don't know anything about organic brown rice syrup, it's pretty much just like sugar, essentially. But you notice there's a ton of different ingredients in here, even though it's saying, hey, this is a protein bar, this is a vanilla protein bar. The ingredient list on the back is massive. This is one that I'm probably going to tend to stay away from because it's against some of the rules that we had discussed. There's plenty of ingredients in here that I can't pronounce or I don't recognize. Tons of ingredients in here that aren't fitting for my nutritional standards. And then obviously this is a massive ingredient list. If it's trying to sell me just a vanilla protein bar, this is something that's not going to be respectful of my nutritional standards that I want to consume. Now, if we go to something like a Lara bar ingredient list, okay, and we click on where is it? Right here, okay. Ingredients: dates, cashews, almonds, lemon juice concentrate, dried lemon juice concentrate, lemon oil, right? Okay, number one, right? Pronounceable, recognizable ingredients. Number two, fitting for my nutritional standards. A lot of us probably have like a real whole food approach to eating for the most part. These are all real whole foods. And this is a relatively small ingredient list for a packaged food, right? We're looking at 2, 4, like 5 ingredients. That's a pretty fantastic option that I have no problem purchasing or providing to my family. And that's just an example of a nutrition bar. But when it comes down to nutritional label versus an ingredient list, I'm always going to veer more towards ingredient list for me personally. But Arian and I brought up really good points. I think it's dependent on goals specifically, but I think it's also important to take both into account. Know how to read a nutritional label, know what to look for, know how that pertains to your goals and what you're trying to do, but then always be mindful of the ingredient list, because you always want to put real whole food sources into your body, and you want to put things that are naturally occurring and as minimally processed as possible, knowing that there is a host of products out there that like to sneak some pretty gnarly stuff into their products.
Those are really good points. I would say it's kind of tough to throw this question in and be like, hey, I think we could get this, keep this conversation relatively short, because I think you and I could go back and forth pretty in depth on this in the entirety of the this time. But I would say there's a couple of things too that you brought up some really good points on natural and some buzzword type things that tend to slip in there. And there is, for better or for worse, the FDA and some of these governing bodies have allowed certain parts per millions and certain ingredients and certain things to fall under certain categories. So Asia brings up a really good point. Like looking at the back of the Lara bar, like it's all pronounceable ingredients, but when you look at what that really is, it's predominantly dates. And when you look at dates are predominantly sugar. So like tying that back into twofold, right? If I'm looking for a snack, and my focal point is to have a higher ingredient bar, the Lara bar is hands down your best bet. It is high quality ingredients. It is, a handful of pieces, but it is still predominantly sugar. And so when you tie that back into your goals, if my goal is weight loss and I have a hard time, right, getting my protein in on a daily basis, and my calories tend to be, something that I am a little bit more concerned with, that tends to be one of those things where it's like this is okay sometimes, but it shouldn't be an all the time thing. Another really interesting thing that I always kind of go back down to is like the measurement of a calorie, right? Even when you think about it, calories are measured. So when they take food and they actually like burn it, and the amount of energy it requires to change the temperature or to increase the temperature typically is basically synthesized into calories. And so something that is more sugar-based or carbon-based, things like that, that has a lot more stored energy, burns at a lot higher rate. Fat is one of those, for instances. It is much denser. So in the same volume, you can have 1 ounce, 1 measured ounce of fat versus 1 measured ounce of sugar, and you're going to have a lot more stored energy in fat. That doesn't necessarily mean anything outside of the fact that you have more energy per square inch in certain calories. And so when we start backing this back up, that's one of the things that I always like to kind of think about, right? When you look at this, typically you're looking at a nutritional label because you're trying to be more specific to a goal. If your goal is to lose weight, right, it is absolutely going to be in your best interest to pay attention to the amount of foods that you're eating, right? If once you have that kind of underway, then Asia's right 100%. The foods that we can get that have a face, that have a better source, like that's the long game, but it is going to have the biggest impact on your health. I love the quote. It's, if quantity has a direct relation to your weight, right, quality has a direct relation to your health. And so you can't overlook either, but you have to know what the entire purpose of what you're doing is.
Boom, that's a great quote that we'll end it on. I might even drop that in the chat. If quantity has a direct relation to your weight, quality has a direct relation to your health. That's hits home, and that's a really good kind of quote to end on and think about, where, you know, there's pros and cons versus both, and I think Gary and I can both agree that they both should be taken into account, especially with goals and whatnot. But really, really good quote there. All right, covered some really good topics. Keep this one brief as always. Next monthly support call will be last Thursday of the month, next month. Just be on the lookout for our newsletter, our post in the Facebook group. We'll keep that as an announcement. Post any questions that you guys have in there. Come live with them like you guys did today. And as always, we're here to help. All of our coaches are here to help and assist. If you guys have any ongoing questions or questions that did not get answered today, feel free to reach out and ask us. Otherwise, I will drop this recording into the newsletter this upcoming week, and we'll put it in the Facebook group. Appreciate your time, guys.
March 31st.
March 31st. There you go. March 31st is our next one. Other than that, you guys make a great one, and we will catch